Well, first I want to thank the New America Foundation for having us. I, in particular, am very honored to be a moderator because up until now, this late date in my career, no one has ever found me moderate enough in my views to actually be a moderator. So I'm really happy to tonight, for the first time in my life, moderate a panel. And it's obviously a great honor to talk about Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique on its 50th anniversary. And obviously it's a book that has put this spark under the culture, and really it's that very, very rare book that one could make the argument that it actually changed people's lives and that it actually changed the culture. It's also come under criticism more recently for only reflecting the lives of a very small group of people, for not talking about working class women who had no choice but to work all along, and not talking about people of other sexual preferences who may have already found themselves kind of askew or outside of conventional life. But what I want to do today a little bit is talk about the ongoing power of this classic. And I recently taught this book to my undergrads at NYU, who a couple of whom are here in this audience, who do not ever hesitate to tell me if something is boring, irrelevant, dated, no longer worthy of their important attention. So it was actually kind of amazing to me that in this class, the class really came to life, and the books sort of spoke to them in really interesting ways. So I want to talk about the new feminine mystiques that are oppressing us still. And I want to talk about the old feminine mystique and whether it still oppresses us. And you know, it's very complicated because we obviously live in a world that has been so transformed by both this book and the movement that followed it, that it's almost hard for those of us, and that's kind of most of us in the room, who were born after the feminine mystique came out. It's hard for us to imagine those days at all. And I just think about the rapidity of change in my own family, with Mom sitting here, I can bring this up. When my mother was a child, her father told her only ugly women become lawyers. So that was the world she grew up in. And I grew up in a world where my mother removed the Barbie beauty palace that my grandfather gave me and told me the next morning when I got up really eager to play with it that it was lost.
So mean.
And, 1970s New York City. And then my daughter, we were watching the Obama-Hillary presidential election, and she was tiny. She was like 5. And she said, I said, she was a big Obama supporter, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a woman president? And she looked at me really disdainfully, and she was like, Mom, of course there's been a woman president. And it was like pretty awesome. Amazing that within that short time we went from only ugly women became lawyers to, of course, there's been a woman president in a 5-year-old girl. So that said, it's very hard for those of us who grew up in the world in which our feminist class, books that are kind of causing people to talk today have names like The Richer Sex or The End of Men. We live in a world in which more women than men get college educations, in which women are for the first time in the majority in the workplace, in which women are in the majority in managerial positions. So it's very hard for us to look back to that other time. And I was, even though we abstractly understand that things were different, we don't know, we can't really see and feel it exactly. I interviewed Janet Malcolm for the Paris Review, and she told me that when she was in college, she had not a single woman professor. And I was just shocked. I was astonished that even though I know that life was like that, it was kind of astonishing to me. So for my first question, I was going to ask our two panelists who were alive when the feminine mystique first
the old folks
emerged, to just describe, just for a moment, one, your experience when you first read the book, and is it overblown or exaggerated to say that this book changed people's lives?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I mean, of course it changed people's lives. It's still changing people's lives. It is passed down through the culture. And it was the greatest social revolution probably since the suffragettes. And that movement took 100 years. This movement will take 100 years. We're only halfway through. And we have to count on the younger ones to really push it along. But I remember reading the feminist Mystique in my mother's bathroom. It was one of the few books that she read, and but it wasn't possible for her to move on it because although she was a gifted singer and she was quite attractive and a natural businesswoman, and she was eager to work, but she's living in a suburban housewife role with 2 children. And my father refused to let her work because it would have suggested, as it would, many men had thought that at the time, that he couldn't support his family. So she was frustrated. She, you know, it was either Valium or vodka, you know, that kept these women going. And it wasn't until she was in her 50s and they were divorced and she went to AA and met another man and became a businesswoman. But she lost, you know, half of her life. I thought I was going to be totally different from her. I loved her. I was compassionate, but I you know, certainly saw that that route was not the right one. But what happened to me? I married a man who I loved, but he was starting medical school. So I thought, aha, this is cool because I have to support us. So I have an excuse to have a career. Mm-hmm. That was my strategy. And I was totally rejected by the other wives of medical students because I was such an oddball. I don't even want a career, you know, that's just so ballsy. And then we got divorced, and having put hubby through before there was any sense of recompense for that sort of thing, I was a single mom, like Katie. And then that changed, you know, my whole trajectory. Then I really became a feminist. But at that time, I mean, I started the Herald Tribune. I was in the women's department because that's the only place you could get a job as a woman writer. And I had to sneak down the back stairs and dare to go across the DMZ, which was the city room where women weren't allowed, to get into the office of the Sunday magazine editor, Clay Felker, and pitch him a story. And thereby, I developed a mentor who allowed me to, you know, move ahead. Gloria Steinem, who was a little older than I, and much more politically sophisticated, but what did she do? She had to, you know, take a job as a bunny to get a story, and then that hung on her forever. But it was only Clay, who was starting New York Magazine, where Ariel was an editor for a long time, who had a mother who was a journalist, and so he really had no attitude about women. He thought, if they're talented, let's move them up. And we can also pay them a little less. So he actually not only fostered my career, but he gave Gloria the very first column written by a woman in politics, a political column, City Politic, which lasted for many, many years. And then when she wanted to start Ms., of course she couldn't raise money. Who was going to give money to a woman who wanted to publish a magazine about, you know, strident women? So Clay said, this is a great magazine idea. Let's put it inside the covers of New York. So he midwifed this building, this magazine, 30 pages inside New York Magazine with the cover on the outside as well as the inside. And it sold out. Gloria called in a panic because she couldn't find it in California where she was, I don't know, leading a grape pickers strike, I think, and said, oh, you know, there's no magazine out here. And Clay said, it's sold out. So that was a great exhibition of a collaboration between a male mentor and a female aspirant, which I think we've sort of lost sight of today. We think only women can help women, but actually, why not, you know, seek out a sponsor who's already at the top?
Great. And Mom, when you read the Feminine Mystique, do you remember where you were? How it affected you?
No, I don't remember where I was. I'm not even sure I know exactly how it affected me, but I do know how everything that came before affected me. And I can only say that there were so few possibilities for women, that we were expected to be married by 21 or 22. We were expected to raise children. We were not expected to do anything. We were not expected to make money. And we were not protected against what would happen if we were divorced or someone died. We had no resources to